The air in the auction hall was thick with the smell of too many species breathing in one place. Alan Harper adjusted the filter on his breathing mask and checked the time. The exotic specimen auction would begin in 10 minutes, and he wanted a good spot to see what was on offer. He wasn't usually the type to attend these events. As a xenobiologist with the Terran Conservation Initiative, he preferred to study alien species in their natural habitats. Not in cages, but the message from his friend Zach had been clear. They have a Xerillian, Alan, maybe the last one. That was enough to bring him across 3 star systems to Nexus Station, a trading hub known for its loose regulations and even looser morals. Alan moved through the crowd of wealthy collectors, traders, and scientists. Some nodded at him, recognizing his work in rehabilitating dangerous species. Others avoided eye contact. His reputation as a bleeding heart who cared more about alien rights than human profit made him unwelcome in certain circles. He found a spot near the front where he could see the display area clearly. The auctioneer, a tall man with silver hair and expensive clothes, tapped on a microphone. "Ladies, gentlemen, and distinguished beings of all configurations," the auctioneer said with a practiced smile. "Welcome to the 53rd Exotic Specimen Auction. Today we have some truly remarkable items for your consideration." Alan frowned at the word items. These were living beings, not objects. The auction began with the usual offerings. A pair of glowing plants from the gas giants of Rigel, a collection of small flying creatures that changed color based on sound, a predatory animal that could camouflage itself against any background. Alan watched as wealthy collectors bid enormous sums. None of these species were endangered enough to justify TCI intervention, so he waited. "And now," the auctioneer said, his voice dropping dramatically, "our main attraction. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you ... a female Xerillian." The crowd gasped as a containment field hummed to life in the center of the display area. Inside was a humanoid figure with metallic blue skin that seemed to shimmer under the lights. Her head was crowned with what looked like crystalline formations instead of hair. Her eyes, completely black except for pinpoints of white light, scanned the crowd with obvious intelligence. "As you know," the auctioneer continued, "the Xerillian homeworld was destroyed in the Cygnus conflict 30 years ago. They were once the most feared warriors in the galaxy, with natural armor stronger than our best composites and telepathic abilities that made them lethal in combat. The Xerillian female stood perfectly still, her posture straight and proud despite the energy, restraints visible around her wrists. This specimen, which we call Vexara, is believed to be one of the last females of her kind. She was recovered from a derelict research vessel near the ruins of Xeril. Our experts estimate she is approximately equivalent to a human in her mid-20s, with a potential lifespan of 3 centuries. Alan studied her carefully. Unlike the other specimens who had appeared defeated or confused, this one radiated defiance and fury. When she turned her head, he caught her gaze for a brief moment. The intensity in those alien eyes made him shiver. "She would make an exceptional addition to any collection," the auctioneer said. "Or for those of you from research institutions? Think of the biological and technological advancements to be gained from studying a living Xerillian." A wealthy collector in expensive clothes stepped closer to the containment field. "Can she understand us?" he asked. "She has shown signs of comprehension," the auctioneer replied. "But I should warn you, she has killed 3 handlers already. Hence the enhanced containment field." The collector laughed and reached a hand toward the field, not quite touching it. "I like them spirited." The Xerillian moved so fast that Alan barely saw it. She lunged at the barrier, her hand striking the energy field with enough force that the entire containment system flickered. The collector jumped back as security guards rushed forward, adjusting controls to strengthen the field. "As you can." "See," the auctioneer said nervously, "she is quite lively." Alan couldn't take his eyes off her. In that moment of attack, he had seen something beyond rage. He had seen calculation, intelligence, and something that looked strangely like grief. "The bidding will start at 1 million credits," the auctioneer announced. Hands went up around the room. 2 million, 3 million, 5 million from the man. who had approached the field. Alan had come with authorization to bid up to 2 million credits from the TCI fund, enough for most rare specimens, but this was quickly exceeding his limit. Still, something about the Xyrillian's eyes kept pulling at him. She wasn't just the last of her kind. She was a person trapped and being sold like property. 10 million, called a voice from the back. A military representative based on the uniform. Alan knew what that meant. If the military got her, she would be studied for her combat abilities, likely dissected eventually. The thought made him sick. 12 million, he said, his voice loud. In the sudden quiet, the auctioneer looked at him in surprise. 12 million from Dr. Harper of the Terran Conservation Initiative, murmurs spread through the crowd. Alan ignored them, keeping his eyes on Vexara. For a moment, he thought he saw her expression change, as if she understood what was happening. 15 million, the military representative countered. Alan swallowed hard. He didn't have authorization for this. He would be risking his career, his research, everything. 20 million, he said firmly. The room went silent. The military representative spoke into a communication device, then shook his head. 20 million going once. As the auctioneer called twice. Sold to Dr. Alan Harper. As the crowd dispersed to examine other specimens, the auctioneer approached Alan with a tablet for his thumbprint. You understand the risks, Dr. Harper? He asked. She's not some simple creature to be studied and released. She's dangerous. Alan glanced at Vexara, who was watching him with unreadable eyes. I understand, he said, pressing his thumb to the tablet and transferring his entire research grant, personal savings, and taking a massive loan against future funding. The auctioneer handed him a control device for the containment field. She be delivered to your ship within the hour. I hope you know what you're doing. Alan nodded, though he wasn't sure himself. As he turned to leave, he looked back at Vexara. For the briefest moment, he thought he saw curiosity replace the rage in her eyes. I'm not going to hurt you, he said quietly, though he knew she couldn't hear him through the field. I'm going to help you. He didn't know if it was a trick of the light, but he could have sworn the crystalline formations on her head shifted color slightly, from deep blue to something with hints of purple. Alan left the auction hall, wondering if he had just made the biggest discovery of his career or the worst mistake of his life. Alan paced the main deck of his research vessel, the Horizon. The ship was small by most standards, designed for a crew of 3, though Alan usually worked alone with only his AI assistant for company. Right now, the ship felt even smaller as he prepared for his new guest. Laurie, is the cargo bay conversion complete? Alan asked, checking the time again. The auction officials would arrive with Vexara any minute. The AI's calm voice filled the room. Conversion is at 97% completion. The environmental controls are set to match what little we know of Xyrillian physiology. Temperature and gravity adjusted to 20% above human standard. Atmospheric composition modified as requested, Alan nodded. And the security measures? The containment field has been installed and tested. It can be controlled from any console on the ship or via your personal device. I must point out again, Dr. Harper, that bringing a Xyrillian aboard represents a significant safety risk. The species was known for their combat abilities and resistance to conventional restraints. I'm aware of the risks, Alan said, more sharply than he intended. He softened his tone. Sorry, Laurie, I know this isn't our usual research subject. Your apology is unnecessary but appreciated, the AI replied. May I ask what your research plan entails? The Terran Conservation Initiative typically focuses on species with viable breeding populations. Alan didn't have a good answer. His decision to buy Vexara had been impulsive, driven by something he couldn't quite explain. We'll start with observation. Document everything we can about the last known Xyrillian. At minimum, we can preserve knowledge of the species. A soft chime indicated a ship approaching the docking bay. Alan took a deep breath and headed down to meet the delivery team. 4 security guards escorted the floating containment field where Vexara stood. Her hands were bound with energy restraints, and she was surrounded by the humming blue glow of the field. She looked even more striking up close. Her metallic blue skin had patterns that shifted subtly in the light, and the crystal formations on her head caught and refracted the light in complex ways. "Sign here," the head guard said, handing Alan a tablet. "Once we transfer control of the containment field to your ship, she's your responsibility. No refunds if she kills you." Alan signed the form. "I understand." The guard gave him a pitying look. "Your funeral, Doc." He pressed a few buttons on his control pad. "Transfer complete. The field is now linked to your ship's systems." The guards left quickly, clearly relieved to be rid of their dangerous cargo. Alan was left alone with Vexara, separated only by the energy field. "Lori, please direct us to the prepared habitat," Alan said, trying to sound confident. "Of course. Dr. Harper, please proceed to Cargo Bay 3. Alan gestured toward the corridor. "This way, please." Vexara didn't move. Her eyes, those strange black orbs with points of light like stars, studied him intently. "I don't know if you understand me," Alan said slowly, "but I'm not going to hurt you. I'm a researcher, a scientist. I want to learn about you, not harm you." The Xyrillian gave no indication that she understood. After a moment, Alan sighed and activated the field's movement function. It began to float slowly in the direction of the cargo bay, with Vexara forced to move along with it. The cargo bay had been transformed. Gone were the storage containers and equipment racks. In their place was an open space with various surfaces at different heights, some soft materials that might serve as bedding, and a small pool of water. Alan had studied the few available records of Xyrillian environments and tried his best to recreate something that might be comfortable. "This will be your space," he explained, knowing she probably couldn't understand him. "The containment field will remain active but will give you freedom to move within this area." He adjusted the controls, expanding the field to encompass the entire habitat while maintaining the energy restraints on her wrists. As soon as the field expanded, Vexara moved. She was incredibly fast, launching herself at the barrier nearest. To Alan, her fist struck the energy field, causing it to flicker momentarily. Alan stepped back instinctively. "Lori, increase field strength by 20%. Field strength increased, the AI confirmed. "Dr. Harper, my sensors indicate that." The subject's attack was not random. She appears to be systematically testing the field for weaknesses. Alan watched as Vexara moved around the perimeter, occasionally striking at different points. Her movements were precise and calculated. This wasn't blind rage, it was methodical. "She's intelligent," he murmured. "Possibly more intelligent than we gave her species credit for." Over the next few hours, Alan observed as Vexara explored her habitat, always keeping one eye on him. She ignored the food he had provided, which worried him. He wasn't sure how long Xyrillians could go without eating. "Lori, I'm going to try something different," Alan said after watching her reject the food for the third time. "I want to establish communication." "The translator systems are unlikely to be effective," Lori pointed out. "We have insufficient data on Xyrillian language patterns, I know. I'm going to try without technology." Alan approached the field, staying just far enough away to be safe. He pointed to himself. "Alan," he said clearly. Vexara stared at him, unmoving. He repeated the gesture. "Alan," the Xyrillian made a sound like crystals chiming against each other. It was strangely beautiful. Alan smiled. "That's right. I'm Alan, and you're Vexara, though I don't know if that's really your name or just what they called you." He spent the next few hours sitting near the field, talking softly about his work, about Earth, about the stars. Vexara watched him the entire time, making no more sounds but never taking her eyes off him. For 7 days the pattern continued. Vexara refused food and remained hostile toward the field. Alan persisted in sitting near her habitat, sometimes working on research. Notes, sometimes just talking. He began to bring pictures and diagrams to show her through the field. On the 7th day, Alan entered the cargo bay to find Vexara sitting near the edge of the field, watching the door as if waiting for him. When he placed the food in the small transfer compartment that allowed items to pass through the field. She approached it cautiously. For the first time, she took the food and ate it. Progress, Alan whispered to himself. That evening, he made a decision that Lori immediately protested. Dr. Harper, deactivating any portion of the containment field is extremely inadvisable. Just a small section, Lori, just enough to show trust. Alan pressed the controls, creating a small opening in the field, just large enough for him to extend his hand through. He held his breath, half expecting Vexara to attack. Instead, she approached slowly, studying his outstretched hand. She made that crystal chiming sound again, quieter this time. Then, to his amazement, she extended her own hand not to grab him, but to mirror his gesture, stopping just short of touching him. Alan smiled. Hello, Vexara. Later that night, unable to sleep, Alan checked the habitat security feed. Vexara was awake, standing before the transparent barrier where he had left his research tablet. On the screen were his notes about humans, with diagrams of anatomy and basic information about Earth. She was reading. Learning about him, just as he was? Trying to learn about her. 2 weeks passed aboard the Horizon. Alan woke early each day, eager to continue his work with Vexara. What had started as simple gestures had evolved into something more complex. They had developed a system of communication using drawings, hand signals, and sounds. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. Alan entered the cargo bay carrying a new tablet. Good morning, Vexara. The Xerillian was waiting near the edge of the containment field. She made the now familiar crystal chiming sound that Alan had come to recognize as a greeting. Her metallic blue skin caught the light as she moved, creating patterns that seemed to shift with her mood. I brought something new today, Alan said, showing her the tablet. Lori helped me create a program that might help us communicate better. He placed the tablet in the transfer compartment and sent it through the field. Vexara took it carefully, her movements more graceful than they had been weeks ago when she had first arrived. Full of rage and suspicion, the tablet displayed simple images paired with human words. Alan pointed to the screen, then to himself. Human, he said clearly. Vexara studied the image, then touched the screen, navigating through the program with surprising ease. She found an image of a star map and pointed to a specific area, making a series of complex sounds. Lori, can you analyze those coordinates? Alan asked. The area she indicated appears to be the former location of Xeril, her homeworld. The AI replied. Vexara nodded, recognizing the word Xyril. She pointed to herself and made a different sound, longer and more melodic than her usual communication. Is that your real name? Alan asked. Not Vexara? She repeated the sound, then pointed to the restraints still on her wrists. Though Alan had expanded the containment field to give her more freedom, he had been hesitant to remove the restraints entirely. Now, looking at the trust that had developed between them, he felt ashamed of his caution. Lori, deactivate the wrist. Restraints, he said. Dr. Harper, I must advise against. Deactivate them. Alan said firmly. The energy bands around Vexara's wrists flickered and disappeared. She rubbed her wrists, looking at Alan with an expression he couldn't quite read. I'm sorry they kept you like that, he said. I'm sorry I kept you like that. Vexara touched the tablet again, bringing up an image of the containment field. She pointed to it, then made a sweeping gesture with her hand. She appears to be requesting the removal of the entire containment field, Lori observed. Alan hesitated. That's a big step. Vexara's eyes, those strange black pools with points of light, held his gaze. She placed her hand against the energy barrier, palm flat, and waited. Alan approached slowly. He placed his hand against the field, directly opposite hers, separated only by the thin energy barrier. For a moment they stayed like that, human and alien, connected yet apart. Lori, Alan said quietly, reduce containment field strength by 50%. The blue glow of the field dimmed. Alan could almost feel the warmth of Vexara's hand now, so close to his. Deactivate the section between our hands, he instructed. A small opening appeared in the field. Vexara's blue hand and Alan's human one were now separated by nothing but air. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then slowly, Vexara pressed her palm against his. A strange sensation flowed through Alan, not painful, but intense. Images flashed in his mind, stars seen from an unfamiliar angle, crystalline cities that caught the light of two suns, and a profound sense of loss so deep it took his breath away. He gasped and stepped back. Vexara withdrew her hand as well. Watching him carefully. "What was that?" Alan whispered. "Your vital signs showed a momentary spike," Laurie reported. "Brain activity increased by 30% during contact." "It was like I could see her thoughts," Alan said. "Or not thoughts exactly, but feelings, memories." He looked at Vexara with new understanding. The reports about Xyrillians having telepathic abilities, they were true. But it's not mind reading like in fiction, it's more like ... emotional communication. Vexara nodded, seeming pleased that he understood. She touched the tablet again, bringing up images of groups of people working together. Then she pointed to her head, then to his, and then made a gesture encompassing the space between them. People communicated this way with each other, Alan realized. That's how you coordinated so effectively in battle. You didn't need verbal commands. Over the next few days, Alan and Vexara continued to develop their communication. Through a combination of the tablet program, gestures, and brief telepathic contact, Alan learned more about Xyrillian culture than any human ever had. "You weren't born in captivity like the auctioneer claimed," Alan said one evening as they sat on either side of a now much weaker containment field. "You were on a research ship when you were captured." Vexara made an affirmative gesture. She used the tablet to create a drawing of many ships fleeing a planet, then drew an X through all but a few. "The destruction of your world," Alan said sadly. "How many of your people survived?" Vexara held up her hand, fingers spread wide. 5,000? 500? She shook her head and pointed to just her 5 fingers. 5? Alan was shocked. "Only 5 Xyrillians survived?" Vexara's expression darkened. She held up one finger. "One?" Alan felt a chill. "Just you? You're the last?" The sadness in her eyes was answer enough. She was not just the last female Xyrillian as the auctioneer had claimed. She was the last of her entire species. That night, Alan sat in his quarters struggling with what he had learned. He had come to care deeply for Vexara, not just as a research subject, but as a person. The thought of her being the last of her kind, carrying the entire legacy of her civilization alone, was heartbreaking. "Laurie," he said finally, "send a message to Dr. Kim at the Terran Conservation Initiative. Tell her I've made significant progress with the Xyrillian subject and request permission to bring her to the Xenobiology Research Center on Europa for further study." "Message sent," Laurie confirmed after a moment. "Dr. Harper, there is an incoming transmission from Earth. Priority 1. Alan frowned. Priority 1 messages were rare. "Put it through." The screen on his wall lit up, showing the stern face of General Richard Cole of the Terran Defense Force. "Dr. Harper," the general said without preamble, "our intelligence indicates you have acquired a live Xyrillian specimen. Under Section 7 of the Dangerous Species Act, you are ordered to proceed immediately to the military research facility on Mars. The specimen is now classified as a strategic asset." Alan felt cold. "General, with all due respect, Vexara is not a specimen. She's an intelligent being, the last of her kind. She belongs in a conservation program, not a military lab." The general's expression hardened. "That wasn't a request, Doctor. A military vessel has been dispatched to escort you. They will reach your position in 3 days. Be ready for transfer." The screen went dark. Alan sat in silence for a long moment. Then he stood up and headed toward the cargo bay where Vexara was kept. He had a decision to make, and not much time to make it. Alan rushed into the cargo bay, his heart pounding. Vexara looked up from the tablet she had been studying, immediately sensing his distress. "We have a problem," Alan said, trying to keep his voice calm. "The military wants to take you to their research facility. They'll be here in 3 days." Vexara tilted her head, the crystal formations catching the light as she processed his words. She had learned enough English by now to understand the basics. They won't treat you like a person. Alan continued. They want to study your combat abilities, maybe even. He couldn't finish the sentence. The thought of Vexara being dissected in a lab made him sick. Vexara stood and approached the edge of the containment field. She made a series of gestures that Alan had come to understand meant she wanted to communicate more directly. He hesitated, only briefly before deactivating a portion of the field, when their hands touched. The now familiar rush of images and emotions flowed between them. Alan saw fragments of her memories, being captured, other Xyrillians dying to protect her, her determination to survive. But this time he also felt her question, "What will you do?" "I won't let them take you," Alan said firmly as their connection broke, "but we need a plan. The military vessel is bigger and faster than the Horizon. We can't outrun them." Alan paced the room, thinking hard. "Lori, set a course for the Ceres mining colony? It's in the opposite direction from Mars. We'll buy some time while I figure something out." "Course set," Lori confirmed. "Estimated arrival at Ceres, 28 hours. Alan turned back to Vexara. "I need to understand more about your abilities. The report said Xyrillians had natural armor and telepathic powers, but I need to know exactly what you can do." Vexara nodded. She touched her arm, then made a fist and struck it against her open palm. The sound was like metal hitting metal. "Your skin," Alan said. "It's not just blue, it's actually a form of natural armor." She nodded, then pointed to her head and then to his, making a connecting gesture between them. "Your telepathic abilities, how far do they extend? Can you communicate with others besides Xyrillians?" Vexara held up her hand, showing a small distance between her thumb and finger. "Limited range," Alan interpreted. "And only with direct contact for non-Xyrillians like me." She nodded, then surprised him by walking to the ship's computer terminal. In her habitat. Her fingers flew across the screen with surprising skill. "Dr. Harper," Lori's voice came through the speakers. "Vexara is accessing the ship's navigation system." Alan watched as Vexara pulled up a star chart and pointed to a region of space far from any human colonies. "What's there?" Alan asked. Vexara used the terminal to type a single word in English. "Home." "But Xyril was destroyed," Alan said gently, not wanting to trigger painful memories. Vexara shook her head and typed again. "New home." Alan's eyes widened. "There are more of your people? I thought you were the last." Vexara's expression was complex hope mixed with uncertainty. She typed, "Not sure, lost contact." For the next several hours, Alan and Vexara worked together, planning their escape. Alan made the difficult decision to completely deactivate the containment field, giving Vexara free run of the ship. If they were going to survive, they needed to trust each other completely. "Dr. Harper," Lori interrupted as they were reviewing. "Star charts. I've detected a vessel on long-range sensors approaching at high speed. It matches the profile of a Terran military cruiser." Alan checked the data. "They're ahead of schedule. They must have been closer than the general indicated." He looked at Vexara. "We have maybe 12 hours before they intercept us." Vexara's expression turned resolute. She placed her hand on Alan's arm and sent him an image of the two of them. "In an escape pod, we could try," Alan said doubtfully. "But escape pods are short-range vehicles. They're not designed for long journeys." Vexara pointed to the star chart again, indicating a small system not far from their current position. "Lori, what's in that system?" Alan asked. "The Proxima Drift," Lori replied. "An asteroid field with several abandoned mining outposts. It's known for strong electromagnetic interference that disrupts sensors and communications." "A hiding place," Alan said with growing excitement. "We could lose them in the interference." The next few hours were a blur of activity. Alan gathered supplies while Vexara used her growing understanding of the ship's systems to plot the most efficient course to the Proxima Drift. Her ability to process navigational data was impressive, further proving to Alan that humans had severely underestimated Xyrillian intelligence. "Dr. Harper," Lori announced suddenly, "the military vessel has increased speed." New intercept time, 3 hours, 17 minutes. Alan felt a chill. They must have realized we're running. He rushed to the bridge, Vexara right behind him. The military cruiser was clearly visible on the long-range sensors now, a predator chasing its prey. We need to reach the escape pod before they're in weapons range, Alan said. Lori, set the ship on autopilot and prepare to transfer your core functions to my personal device. Transfer ready, Lori confirmed. But Dr. Harper, I must warn you that this course of action constitutes desertion and theft of government property. The penalties are severe, I know, Alan said quietly. But some things are more important than rules. As they prepared the escape pod, a new alert sounded. Warning, incoming transmission from military vessel USS Valiant. The screen lit up showing a stern-faced captain. Dr. Harper, this is Captain Greg Foster of the Terran Defense Force. You are ordered to cut engines and prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will be considered an act of treason. Alan glanced at Vexara, who stood just out of the camera's view. I'm sorry, Captain, but I can't do that. This is not a negotiation, Doctor, Foster replied coldly. Your cargo is now military property. If you resist, we are authorized to use force. The transmission cut off abruptly. Alan turned to Vexara. We need to go now. They rushed to the escape pod bay. As Alan initiated the launch sequence, the ship shuddered violently. Warning, tractor beam detected, Lori announced. The horizon is being held in place, Alan's heart sank. They've got us. Vexara placed her hand on the ship's control panel. Her eyes closed in concentration, and the crystal formations on her head began to glow with an inner light. The ship's systems flickered, and suddenly the tractor beam indicator went from red to green. Tractor beam disengaged, Lori reported, a note of surprise in the AI's voice. Unknown system override detected? How did you, Alan began, but there was no time for questions. Launch the pod. The escape pod detached from the horizon with a jolt. Through the viewport, Alan could see the military vessel growing larger as it approached his abandoned ship. They'll realize we're gone soon, he said, programming the pod's course toward the Proxima Drift. We need to reach the asteroid field before they can get a lock on us. Vexara watched the stars through the viewport, her expression a mixture of hope and determination. She turned to Alan and touched his hand gently. The emotion she shared wasn't fear or worry, it was gratitude. You're welcome, Alan said softly. Now, let's find out if there really are more of your people out there. The escape pod accelerated toward the distant asteroids, a tiny speck of life carrying the hopes of two very different beings united in their quest for freedom. The escape pod drifted silently between the massive asteroids of the Proxima Drift. Inside, Alan checked their supplies while Vexara kept watch through the viewport. They had been hiding for 3 days, moving carefully from one asteroid to another, avoiding the military patrols searching for them. The good news is we have enough food and water for another week, Alan said. The bad news is the pod's fuel cells are almost depleted. We can't keep moving like this for much longer. Vexara nodded, understanding the situation. She pointed to a distant cluster of asteroids, then to the navigation screen. You want to go there? Alan asked, what's special about that area? Vexara took his hand, sharing a brief telepathic image. Alan saw a structure built into the side of an asteroid, almost invisible unless you knew exactly what to look for. There's something there, Alan realized. Something your people built? Vexara nodded, her crystal formations shifting to a deeper blue color that Alan had come to associate with determination. Lori, can you scan that region for any artificial structures? Alan asked his AI assistant, now running on his portable device. Scanning is limited due to the electromagnetic interference, Lori replied. However, there appears to be an anomaly consistent with non-natural formations on the third asteroid in that cluster. Alan plotted a careful course, using the minimal remaining fuel to push them toward the location. As they drew closer, he could see it, a small entrance carved into the rock face, barely large enough for their pod to pass through. It looks abandoned, Alan said as they approached. Are you sure about this? Vexara's gaze was fixed on the entrance, her expression intense. She made a series of crystal sounds that Alan had never heard before, almost like a code or password. 2. His amazement, lights flickered to life around the entrance, creating a pathway into the asteroid. Automated systems, Alan whispered. They're still working after all this time. He guided the pod carefully through the entrance into a small docking bay. The doors closed behind them, and the chamber pressurized automatically. Breathable atmosphere. Detected, Lori reported. Temperature and gravity consistent with Xyrillian standards. Alan and Vexara donned simple breathing masks as a precaution, then exited the pod. The facility was dark except for emergency lighting that activated as they moved forward. Vexara walked with confidence, as if she knew exactly where she was going. Was this some kind of outpost? Alan asked, noting the abandoned workstations and equipment that looked far more advanced than human technology. Vexara led him deeper into the facility, finally stopping at a sealed door. She placed her hand on a panel beside it, and the door slid open to reveal a large circular chamber. In the center was a pedestal with a glowing crystal formation similar to the ones on Vexara's head. What is this place? Alan asked in wonder. Vexara approached the pedestal, then turned to Alan and gestured for him to stay back. She placed both hands on the crystal, and immediately the room was filled with light. Holographic displays activated along the walls, showing star charts, data streams, and images of Xyrillian cities. It's a data repository, Alan realized. A backup of your civilization's knowledge. Vexara's eyes were closed in concentration as she communicated with the system. The crystal glowed brighter, and a new hologram appeared in the center of the room, a three-dimensional map of a distant galaxy, with one star system highlighted. Is that where the others are? Alan asked. The new Xyrillian home? Vexara opened her eyes and nodded. She pointed to a specific point on the holographic map, then to another console across the room. Alan followed her to the second console, which displayed what looked like a doorway or portal. I don't understand. How could your people have reached that galaxy? It's millions of light years away. Vexara touched several controls, and the hologram changed to show a swirling tunnel of energy, a wormhole. They created artificial wormholes, Alan said in awe. Your species was far more advanced than humans ever realized. Vexara nodded, then pointed to the center of the chamber where the crystal sat. She made a series of gestures that Alan interpreted. As activation or powering up, you can open a portal from here? He asked, understanding dawning. That's why you wanted to come to this place. Not just to hide, but to go home. Before Vexara could respond, an alarm sounded. Lori's voice came, urgently from Alan's device. Military ships detected entering the asteroid field. They appear to be tracking our pod's ion trail. Alan checked the facility's external sensors. 3 military vessels were approaching their location. They found us, he said grimly. How long before they reached this position? Approximately 17 minutes, Lori replied. Vexara worked quickly at the crystal console, her movements precise and urgent. The crystal began to pulse with energy, and a low hum filled the chamber. You're trying to activate the portal, Alan realized. But will it still work after all this time? Vexara didn't answer, focused entirely on her task. The humming grew louder, and sparks of energy began to dance around the crystal. The facility shook as something struck the outer hull. Warning, weapons fire detected, Lori announced. The military vessels are attempting to breach the asteroid. They're not even trying to negotiate, Alan said bitterly. They just want to take you, no matter the cost. Vexara looked up from her work, her eyes meeting Alan's. She held out her hand to him, sharing a brief but intense telepathic message. It wasn't in words, but Alan understood perfectly. The portal was almost ready, but she wouldn't go without him. You want me to come with you? Alan asked, stunned. To leave everything behind? Another explosion rocked the facility. Hull breach detected in the outer chambers, Lori warned. Estimated time until military forces reach this position, 6 minutes. Vexara's gaze remained steady on Alan's face. The choice was his, but time was running out. Alan thought of his life on Earth, his work with the Terran Conservation Initiative. He had dedicated his career to preserving endangered species, to fighting against the extinction of unique forms of life. But he had never faced a choice like this. "If I stay, they'll take you to a military lab," he said quietly. "Everything everything your people were, will be lost or twisted into weapons research?" Another explosion, closer this time. The lights flickered. 3 minutes until breach, Laurie warned. The crystal in the center of the room was glowing brilliantly now, and a small point of light had appeared above it, expanding slowly into what looked like a tear in the fabric of reality. "It's working," Alan breathed. Through the growing portal, he could see stars in unfamiliar patterns, and what might have been the edge of a planet. Vexara held out her hand once more, a simple gesture that asked the most profound question. "Will you come?" Alan heard the sound of weapons and shouting from the corridor outside. The military forces had breached the inner facility. He looked at the portal, then back at the door, and made his decision. "Yes," he said, taking Vexara's hand, "let's go." Together, they stepped toward the portal just as the door to the chamber burst open. Captain Foster and his soldiers rushed in, weapons raised. "Stop right there, Harper!" Foster shouted. Alan looked back one last time at the humans who would have caged Vexara, studied her, perhaps destroyed her in their quest for weapons and power. Then he turned away from them toward the stars beyond the portal. "Ready?" he asked. Vexara. She squeezed his hand in response, her crystal formations glowing with a warm, golden light he had never seen before. Hand in hand, human and Xyrillian stepped through the portal. There was a moment of disorientation, a sensation of being stretched across vast distances, and then they were standing on solid ground beneath an alien sky. The portal closed behind them with a flash of light, cutting off the shouts of the soldiers. Forever, before them stretched a landscape of crystalline structures catching the light of two suns. In the distance, figures moved, blue-skinned figures with crystal formations on their heads. "You weren't the last," Alan said in wonder. "Your people survived." Vexara made a sound that Alan had never heard before, something like laughter, filled with joy and relief. She tugged at his hand, eager to move forward, to rejoin her people, to introduce them to the human who had helped her find her way home. Alan smiled and walked with her toward the Xyrillian settlement, leaving behind one world but finding another, a new beginning for both of them.